So we're kicking off this Tuesday edition of the SportsMax Zone. Talking football, it was a disappointing end to Jamaica's CONCACAF Nations League campaign as the Reggae Boyz were put to the sword by a stunning first-half performance from Mauricio Pochettino's USA in St. Louis, Missouri on Monday night. The USA were ahead by 3-0 at half-time, and despite a fight-back in the second half from Jamaica, the team slumped to a 5-2 aggregate defeat and were condemned to their first loss away from home in the competition since 2019. Head coach of the Reggae Boyz, Steve McLaren, chose to take the positives from the loss, including praise for one of his substitutes.
We have tremendous spirit. We stick together. We could have folded at half-time. We didn't. I said at half-time, we have to win the second half. That's so important. And at half-time, you can only change three things, which is shape, personnel, and attitude. And I think we did that. We defended with a back five. So yes, we had 6 defenders on the field. It gave us a foothold in the game. We only made one personnel change, which was Richard King, to come in and make a 5, lose a man in midfield. I gotta say, I thought he was excellent. Dealt with the ball, real composure, good passing, a sign for the future. And we changed the attitude. We were on the front foot. We weren't passive. We were aggressive. And that gave us opportunities. We had opportunities before we scored. We scored. We had opportunities again. But we're always vulnerable on the transition, and the fourth goal was, kick in the teeth. But still, we came back. I mean, that's character, that's courage. That's what the team has got. We have to build on that by tactically and technically better, because that's what the USA were tonight.
Yeah, Jamaica coach Steve McLaren there with us to break down the match and the full talking points, our in-house football analyst, Liz Williams. Liz, let me start by, before we get your opinion on what happened last night, your reaction to Steve McLaren's comments.
I think he's right for the most part. I think he may have downplayed the tactical element of the game, which we'll get on to. You know, that's my favorite part. But I think he might have downplayed the how badly, I guess you can say, that Jamaica performed tactically in comparison to the USA. But I think generally he's on point. His team performed much better in the second half. His team looked much more cohesive in the second half, ironically, as well, which we'll get on to. But I do think that most of the points he made were valid, but I just think he downplayed the tactical element of the result a bit too much for me.
Okay, and going to the result now and what happened last night, why did the first leg game just have 1 goal in it, and last night's game had 6, including 4 for the USA?
Well, there are a few things that the USA changed. I think the first leg was a very tactical game, but it was much different. In this game, the USA, and this is why they went out and they got Mauricio Pochettino, because the USA have always had a lot of talent. They went through a golden generation in the early 2000s with London Donovan and other players. Now they have their second iteration of that, and they have so much talent, but they didn't have that coach to take them over the edge. Mauricio Pochettino has widely been known as one of the best coaches in world football for quite some time. So he's now coming to this USA team and he's giving them just a bit more. So when we look on what he did tactically, first I'd like to say, when any coach is developing an offensive structure, that offensive structure is built in mind on how they can, I would like to say, create tension and disorientate a team's defensive structure. I think USA did this to a really high level, especially in the first half, to Jamaica. Now, Jamaica set up in their back four. They were pressing in a 4-4-2, at times a 4-2-3-1. But if you were to focus on what the USA did really well, they, firstly, something that Pochettino hasn't done while being USA boss, he went to a system where he inverted one of his fullbacks, that being Anthony Robinson, from the left-hand side, and he had a key role. I think he was actually the man of the match in this game for the USA. So let me break down why having an inverted fullback is so important, first of all.
Okay.
So a left back usually stays wide. That's just how things are. But when you invert your left back, I mentioned creating tension. When a fullback goes into the middle of the pitch, it does a couple of things. As you can see here, it creates space for other players. Football is all about space. Everything that is done is to create space which can be dominated. He, playing in the middle of the pitch, created space for Pulisic, who was playing in attacking midfield, as you saw a clip there, to drag out wide, create space in turn for Weah, who then would in turn create space for Anthony Robinson to attack. So that's another thing the USA did really well, which was overload the wide areas.
Yeah.
Something that Jamaica prepped for, but if you were to slow it down right here, look at the space Anthony Robinson has on the ball in that scenario, and Jamaica, then they face, that's where the tension comes in. Leon Bailey, the right winger, who's supposed to be naturally marking that left back, when the left fullback goes inside, Anthony Robinson now forces Leon Bailey to make a decision. Is he going to follow him into the middle, or is he going to leave him free? If he follows him into the middle, that then creates a space for the left centre-back to have a direct pass always to the left winger. I also prepped a clip of that so you can see Tim Ream, who had a superb game. They conceded 2 goals, that's why I'm not going to say he's my man of the match, but Tim Ream was absolutely fantastic. Over 80-plus passes in the game at a 99% pass accuracy. He dictated the tempo all day, or all night. So when he has a pass directly into the winger, who is now 1v1 against his defender, that's never a situation that you want your team to be in. So I think all of those tactical changes, being the wide overloads and the inversion of Anthony Robinson from left back, it really disorientated the Jamaican defensive structure early and caused America to be extremely comfortable in possession. As I mentioned also when previewing the game, I said that the USA had a 67% pass accuracy in the final third. In this game, that at 86% because of how many bodies they could get centrally, and they would always have an option out wide as well. So I think on a tactical level, I know a lot of people, especially seeing that we're all Jamaicans because Mariah is an honorary Jamaican here as well. We're all Jamaicans.
Wow. Thank you for that.
No, anytime, Mariah. We're all Jamaicans. I know most people watching that we would know would be Jamaicans. So they're going to look at it and say, 3-0 down at halftime, this team is rubbish. This team is no good. But if we were watching USA play Mexico and USA played a first half like that, everyone would be saying, wow, this is one of the best performances I've ever seen from the US. And as an analyst, that's how I look at football. And for that first 45 minutes, I was genuinely blown away by the quality
They
that
were
USA
excellent.
showed.
They were excellent.
They were brilliant.
Yeah, and even the goal from Christian Pulisic, and you spoke about, players basically setting up other players, making the space and ensuring that their goal scorers are ready once the opportunity arises. That goal, so the one with Christian Pulisic, where you saw Ricardo Pepi kind of distract Andre Blake. And I use the word distract because it's very difficult to get Andre Blake away from his goal. We know his quality. That was top class.
No, it was brilliant. And USA did, another reason why I inverted fullback or having an extra body in the midfield is so crucial is because it can draw the press onto you. So when Jamaica went to press, the USA then created what people like to call an artificial transition. So it's not a transition in the way where you win the ball back and you try to counter as quickly as possible. They did it in a way where they draw the Jamaican team onto you, and then because so many people are there to press, it creates space in behind the Jamaican defense. And once they got out with a couple of passes, and McKennie picked a wonderful pass to Christian Pulisic, but as you mentioned quite rightly, Maria, Pepe did excellently because he knew he was never going to receive the ball.
Right.
But he did 2 things. He distracted Andre Blake, 1, and 2, he drew away Damian Lowe from the space on that right, which he was covering because Tavon Gray had advanced. So
Yes.
that's what allowed Pulisic to have a free run into that space. Could he have been tracked a bit better by one of the midfielders? Yes. But I think at that point it's nitpicking because the space was there, he attacked it, and the USA created this scenario through just wonderful, fluid movement.
Yeah, and one of the things we have to talk about is Demarai Gray. He got 2 goals on the score sheet for the Jamaica Reggae Boyz. I woke up this morning and I was listening to some of the foreign analysts, American analysts, ESPN and all of that. And one of the things, they were so disappointed that, their goalkeeper allowed those goals into the net. And they were, of course, criticizing and speaking about it. I'm happy that Jamaica got those 2 goals. But What is your assessment of, one, how Demarai Gray went about his match yesterday, and just the 2 goals that were scored, Lish?
I think he had a pretty all right game. Generally speaking, I don't think that Jamaica played poorly. I think USA were just that good. So, but in terms of Demarai Gray, as I said, he had an all right game. He contributed, obviously, with scoring. I think he took his goals well. In terms of Matt Turner, probably the first goal, he turned it into a dangerous area, so I can see where the criticism would come from. But I think Gray hasn't been at his best. He hasn't been playing much club football. So I think that's a little bit there, and that's a common theme throughout the Jamaican squad, really. The man who set him up, Isaac Hayden, hasn't played a minute of club football this season. So I think Jamaica needs to get their players somehow playing more football. But I think, and also towards the end of the game, you could see Demarai Gray struggling with cramp, not something that he usually does because he's a phenomenal athlete. So I do think that that's going to be a slight issue going forward. But both of his goals, I think, were very well taken. And Jamaica switched to a 3-at-the-back system. And I'd like to point this out. Right before the first game, when we got the lineups, everyone saw that Jamaica was playing 3-at-the-back. And we're like, what is his coach doing? He's so defensive. He's so this, he's so that. But how ironic is it that the only grace that Jamaica got out of this fixture was when he had to revert back to the 3-at-the-back. And the reason why he went 3-at-the-back in the first place, as I said yesterday, was because he anticipated USA to overload the wide areas. So now USA didn't do that in the first leg, they did it in the second. So when they went to that structure, that's why Jamaica could have so many chances, so much freedom, because that 3-at-the-back structure nullified a lot of what the USA wanted to do. It also allowed someone like Ronaldo Cephas to have a good game. And if you noticed, Anthony Robinson could not invert anymore.
No.
Because he had to go back to his natural fullback position because Cephas was always there in the transition. And finally, Richard King got to play. Now, I said on the show yesterday, Holgate is not very good anymore. That's just the truth of it. Deshaun Bernard, he's a pretty okay player, but in reality, Richard King does have his faults. He is loses his concentration a few times defensively, and we saw that yesterday. But when it comes on to ball playing, off air, Sir Lance, I told you that I was going to say something controversial. I was born in 1998. Richard King, I've been watching football since 2005. Richard King is the best ball-playing centre-back I've seen play for Jamaica. And I'm not saying that only in his passing, because ball-playing encapsulates so more than that. It's both your passing and your carrying, the combination of those two things. And as he came on, you could see his instant quality and how high it was above the other players. 12 of his 13 passes, 100% long pass accuracy, 100% dribble accuracy. So I think he has to get a look in, and I'm glad that Steve McLaren mentioned him in his post-match interview.
Yeah, a quick one, DJ. Given everything that you have just said relating to the quality that the USA showed last night, especially in the first half, the Pochettino effect, which I guess you definitely do not want to downplay, would you therefore say that the result is a true reflection of where Jamaica is in the global football space? And even if you want to limit that to the CONCACAF football space?
Yeah, I think it is a reflection, because there's still so much to do. Even though Pochettino is new into his reign, this is only his 4th game, I do think that because this USA team, most of these players are around the same age, they've been playing together for quite some time, and because Pochettino, most importantly, aligns with what USA football is. High pressure, high intensity transitions. And that's what Pochettino is as a coach. So the period of him to assimilate and get into the USA program is going to be much shorter than what Steve McLaren is trying to accomplish. So I do think that it shows where Jamaica is and what they do need to do. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because, as I said, I don't think Jamaica played badly by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think we've, sort of had this discussion before, certainly when Steve McLaren just took over the job as the Reggae Boyz head coach. Now we've had the opportunity to see him for a few matches. We've had the opportunity to see what he is about and where he is trying to take the team. I want your assessment of what McLaren brings and whether that is in any way different from what we saw from someone like Herma Hallgrimsson, who was in the post before. based on what you've seen from McLaren, is it an upgrade on what Hal Grimson brought previously?
And do you want to go back to Schaefer as well? Or are you just limiting it?
I want to go back to even Whitmore and not just Schaefer, but I want to start with the most recent two first.
Well, I'm going to answer that question with a famous Jamaican talk. Mariah, you might not have heard this one before. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I've heard it. I have real Jamaican friends.
I like that, Mariah.
I
Right
don't
in
think
there.
that's Jamaican, really. I think it's said outside of Jamaica as well.
It's probably how I said it.
Okay, go ahead, though. Go ahead.
But I do think that there isn't much different in terms of the quality of coach, in my opinion. I think that McLaren obviously comes with a much bigger reputation. He is known to be a manager that can draw a squad together. That's what really his thing is. That's always been his thing.
Hold it there, Liz. I want to put the question to you this way. If Pochettino was coaching Jamaica last night and McLaren was coaching the USA, would the result have been different?
How long would each coach be coaching?
Same time they have been coaching their respective units now.
With the same players?
Yes. No. Pochettino with the same Jamaican players, McLaren with the same US players.
It would have been much closer, I'll tell you that. But I think that's an unfair comparison.
But why would it be closer?
Why is it an unfair comparison? And here's why I don't think it's an unfair comparison, because where I'm trying to get with this, a lot of times we look at the coaches, and I know that Jamaicans and generally Caribbean supporters want their teams to play a particular way. My issue has always been whether we have the quality, the competence, the ball players to play the way that a lot of Caribbean people want their teams to play. In my opinion, I think Hal Grimson realized that what he had could not necessarily play that way. And so the goal was always to limit damage and try and score where you can. Having said that, I look at the players. I see an aging group of Reggae Boyz players. I see a group of players who are not necessarily week in, week out playing competitive football, playing 90 minutes at the club level. And for me, when you take all of that into consideration, how much can you really expect? Are we, as a fan base, expecting too much from this team?
Well, no. And I'd like to go against what you said when you said that you think that Hal Grimson realized that that's why he didn't want to play that way. Because we have no evidence based on any of Hal Grimson's jobs.
That he can play any other way?
Exactly, because he has gone to Ireland with a better team, with more technical players, and has gone even more defensive than he was with Jamaica. When he was at Iceland, he was equally as defensive with a more talented and technical squad. So I think that managers have their own...
But not as explosive teams, with the type of speed and tenacity that I think you get. Technical quality, yes, so I understand that aspect, but there are other benefits of the Jamaican setup that he might not get with those teams.
But you see, the thing is now, Ricardo, I do think that I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you to some extent, but I am someone who is well versed in the finer details of the game, and I think that coaching is always the great equalizer. Yes, I'm not saying that Jamaica has the most technical midfielders, defenders, this, that, and the third, but the role of a coach is always to put his players, his or her players, into positions where they can succeed the most. And I say that to say, if Jamaica, we have seen it at club level, at international level. Before, let me call a random club, Brighton. When you look at players like Dunk and Pascal Gross and certain players that they have passed through Brighton or stayed there for quite some time, no one looked at and profiled those players as intelligent ball players. They probably aren't the best ball players because when they go into other scenarios, when you see Dunk go for England, play for England in another sense, he doesn't show the same expansion. The reason why he shows it for Brighton is because he's put into places to succeed. So when you have coaches that like to coach, say, for instance, a 3-2 build-up, they know they don't have good ball-playing pivots. Instead, they use those 2 pivots in front of the back 3 as wall players. So instead of those players being asked to turn and then start the play, they know that if the centre-backs are getting pressed, you pass the ball in between the block, and then those players play wall passes who, say for instance, we have a Richard King and a Latibodere. Latibodere is playing in the pivot. We know Latibodere isn't well-versed in turning and spraying expansive passes. Richard King can. So if the opponent identifies that, say, okay, we're going to press Richard King, we're not going to allow him to play. If Richard King plays a wall pass from Latibodere, a player is going to jump, a player is going to create space, and Richard King then in turn will have space to play. These are the small, intricate, random things that people don't usually notice. If you look back, I'm not sure if we still go have the clip, but look at the Pepe goal from the first leg. Pulisic received the ball twice. Cardoso played the ball to him twice. The first pass, he did not have the space to turn. So the wall pass then caused a Jamaican player to jump. The second pass, immediately played, Pulisic had all the space in the world to do anything he wants. That's not a difficult pass. Jamaicans can play that pass, but they're not coached right now to make those. Here it is again, the first wall pass. When Pulisic moves into the space, Latibodere was right there. Latibodere was marking him. But immediately, after receiving the second pass, he's in all acres of space. That's all down to coaching and intelligence. So I'm not saying that McLaren is the person going to coach that intelligence. That's not what I'm saying here. All I'm saying is that coaching is the great equalizer, and it can be better for Jamaica than we think.
Yeah, well, I know we're pretty much out of time, and I know we have to go. I wish we had all show to discuss this, and I completely understand what you're saying in terms of coaching and intelligence. But you are talking about a Pulisic who has played at the highest level for some of the best teams in the world, and who has essentially been coached and taught by different high-level coaches. And I'm not saying that's not...
I've seen Leon Bailey do that exact same assist and a goal exactly like that.
Where?
For Aston Villa, I've never seen him collect the ball consistently in those scenarios. Because for Aston Villa, Leon Bailey plays very central. I've never seen him consistently be able to get the ball in those advantageous areas. I'm not saying Leon Bailey is playing well. But all I'm saying is that if a coach was there to put Leon Bailey and platform him and our other attacking players in a way where coaches platform a Christian Pulisic. Leon Bailey and Christian Pulisic are very similar in terms of quality.
5 seconds because we're out of time.
We've been out of time.
Theodore Whitmore, Winfried Schaefer, Heimerel Grimson, and now Steve McLaren. The last 4 Reggae Boyz coaches, right, Lance?
Yeah.
If you had to pick a coach, and it had to be one of those, based on everything you've seen, which one are you going with?
Tapa.
That's the answer I expected from a smart man, but it might shock a lot of people.
Well, I can tell you that Panama also booked their semi-final spot after a 2-2 draw against Costa Rica, and that was enough to send them through to the semi-finals as well. But there was also a story from the Honduras Mexico game, and that is a story we'll discuss when we come back from the break, because the Honduran fans got into trouble based on a CONCACAF ruling, and we'll talk about that with Juan Girango after the break.